This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, everyone. I'm Talia.
And I'm Tanya.
And together we are TNT Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Talia.
How is today? Don't answer that. Just don't. I already know. I'm here to make it better.
Really, you are?
Probably not.
Really? You're going to make it better? I don't think so.
I'm not. Today's episode for all of our listeners, and welcome back, everybody. Today is hashtag not for the faint-hearted.
Oh, boy.
For real. It's really tragic. It's really sad. It's horrible. You've been warned, guys. Before I start, I want to ask everybody to take 1 second to subscribe and or follow us. And also, if you all could just tell one friend about us, that would be so helpful. Anyway, I'm done chit-chatting.
All right, let's get to the episode.
Let's get to the story. And again, you've all been warned. In January of 2007, Channon Christian was a beautiful and intelligent 21-year-old sociology major who studied at the University of Knoxville in Tennessee. Shannon had moved from Louisiana to Tennessee in 1997 with her family, and they settled in a small town called, I believe it's pronounced Farragut, which is an upscale community in West Knoxville, where Shannon ended up graduating from high school. She'd been dating 23-year-old Christopher Newsom for about 2 months, so they had a new relationship, but they were really enamored with each other. Christopher, who went by Chris, he was a bit different than Shannon. He played varsity baseball in high school, but he came from more of a blue-collar area in North Knoxville. After graduating in 2002, Chris began working as a carpenter, and unlike Shannon, he never went to college. By all accounts, like I said, they were two very different people. Yet they had this undeniable chemistry between them. In an interview with the author of Endless Nightmare, his name is Mike Pelletier, and I got some of my information from his Kindle book. Hugh Newsom, who was Chris's father, reported that his son had confided to him that he loved Shannon. He actually had fallen in love.
Aww.
And friends of Shannon said she felt the same. On January 6th, Shannon drove her silver 2005 Toyota 4Runner to Washington Ridge Apartments. That was where her friend Kara lived. So Shannon drove there, hung out with Kara, and expected to meet up with Chris later on. Meanwhile, Chris spent that day golfing with his buddy, Josh Anderson. When they were done golfing, he went home and he took a shower. Before he left his parents' house, they asked him if he wanted to get something to eat, but he told them that he was going to go get some food with Shannon. At around 8 p.m., Kara left her apartment, and Shannon told her that Chris and her would meet up later at a mutual friend's house. This friend's name was Jamie Hampton, and Jamie was throwing himself a birthday bash, which Chris and Shannon planned on going to later that night. After Kara left, Shannon stayed behind in Kara's apartment. She surfed the web, and she waited for Chris to come over. It was early evening when Chris left his parents' house in his pickup truck to go see Shannon at the apartments. Before he went to the Washington Ridge Apartments, he told his golfing buddy Josh that he'd give him a lift to Jamie's birthday party. While dropping Josh off, Chris said that he was going to go do something with Shannon, and then they would head over to the party. He left and drove to Washington Ridge Apartments, where Shannon was, and the drive was about 10 minutes away. When he got there, he parked his truck, but the two never made it to the party. They just didn't show up. This didn't sit well with their friends, and they started getting mad at them. They were getting pissed because they were supposed to be there for the birthday party. Multiple friends called the couple's cell phones, but by 10 p.m., the phones were going right to voicemail. At around 12:30, two friends, Josh and a man named Justin Russell, They went looking for them. They knew that Channon and Chris were supposed to meet up at the Washington Ridge apartments, so they stopped there first. When they got there, they saw that Chris's truck was in the parking lot, but Shannon's 4Runner was nowhere to be found. This was really odd to them because Shannon and Chris usually drove in Chris's truck, and Chris was usually the driver. You know, guys like to be the ones driving the car. Their friends assumed that they must have found something they thought was better to do than go to the party, so they kind of just let it go. Around 12:40 that night, Shannon's parents received a call from Shannon. She told them that her and Chris had gotten something to eat and they were going to finish watching a movie, so she'd be home in a couple hours. Shannon's mother stayed up to wait for her. When Shannon didn't arrive home by 3:30, her mom called her cell phone, but no one answered. The next morning, Sunday, January 7th, her parents woke up and noticed that Shannon still didn't make it home and had in fact failed to show up for work that day, which was completely out of character for Shannon. She just wasn't that kind of person. They called her phone, but she didn't answer. They reached out to all her friends, and then they found out that Chris was nowhere to be found too. Of course, they called the hospitals looking for them, and eventually they decided to contact the Knoxville police and file a missing persons report. Being that Shannon and Chris were both adults, the police didn't really do anything about it. Even though the police wouldn't take any action, Chris and Shannon's family, they did. And it's really amazing what they did. They were able to convince Shannon's cell phone provider to help them locate the last place her cell phone pinged.
Wow.
I would have thought you needed a warrant, but...
Right. They're usually very uncooperative in the stories we've done, I think, and the ones that I've heard of.
Yeah, it's weird. The cell phone company told them that her phone last pinged near a cell tower on Cherry Street, which is a major street in East Knoxville. Shannon's parents also discovered that after Shannon had called them at 12:40 a.m., her voicemail was accessed 3 times. The first time was at 3 a.m., then again Sunday at 1:32 in the afternoon, and the last time was Sunday at 1:37 in the afternoon. So this is the next day. In order to access the voicemails, a password has to be entered into the voicemail system. So whoever retrieved the voicemails had to have known the password. Now they don't know if this is Shannon or if this is someone else. Shannon's dad, Gary, and her brother Chase, they started driving around the cell tower area where her phone last pinged looking for her car. And they found it at 1:30 in the morning on Monday. They were able to locate the silver 4Runner, but neither Shannon nor Chris was in it. They again contacted the Knoxville police, who by this time had agreed to open an investigation. The police opened an investigation, but they hadn't made a connection between the missing couple and a smoldering corpse that had been located on Sunday, the day before. At around noon on Sunday, a little more than 12 hours after the couple disappeared, an engineer named John Ford, who worked at the Norfolk Southern Railroad, discovered the charred remains of a person, still hot, near railroad tracks between Cherry Street and 9th Avenue, which is only a short distance from where Shannon's phone pinged and her car was found.
Can you imagine?
No.
I would have been terrified.
Unbelievable. The corpse was burned beyond recognition, and because it was found on a Sunday, no one attempted to identify the body. Whosever job it was to identify the body had the day off. I'm not making this up. Okay, I'm not.
What? So I guess that's the best day to commit a crime, right?
Oh, no, yeah. I was saying note to self.
Yeah, note to self.
I'm not
in Knoxville. I'm sure they've changed their protocol.
I'm sure they've changed their protocol.
But what the hell?
There were quite a few mistakes made, but I'm not going to blame anybody. So just to be clear on the timeline, Chris and Shannon were set to go to that party on Saturday evening, sometime after 8. Shannon and Chris's parents reported them missing on Sunday, and that same day is when the body was found The next day, her car was found. Of course, an autopsy was done on the body, and the medical examiner confirmed that the charred body was indeed the body of Christopher Newsom. And this is going to be very graphic for like a couple minutes.
Oh, get your seatbelts on, everyone.
His face and head had been wrapped in a sweatshirt, and a gray and white sock was in his mouth, secured in place by his shoelace, which was wrapped and then tied in the back of his neck. A blue bandana was tied around his eyes. He was found naked from the waist down, and his shoes were missing. He had a belt tied around his ankles. His other shoelace tied his wrists together behind his back. There were floral strips of a cloth nearby his body, and also a broken dog leash, which they believe was used to lead him to his death.
Oh.
His feet were bare and muddy, indicating that he had walked barefoot to the area where he was killed. He had been brutally raped with an object of some sort that caused severe rectal damage, and he'd been set on fire. They also found semen inside him.
Okay.
After all that was done to him, he was wrapped in a comforter, doused with gasoline, set afire. 80% of his body was charred. The autopsy further revealed that Chris had been shot 3 times. Once on the right side of his head, once on the right side of the neck, and once in the back. The entry path of the first bullet into his back suggests that he was forced to bend over, just probably as another way to humiliate him, and he was shot once bent over. The medical examiner said that Chris had been shot first and died because there wasn't any soot found in his airways, although chemicals consistent with smoke inhalation from tobacco was found in his bloodstream. His stomach was empty, so he must have never made it out to eat. The shot that killed him was actually touching his head. The gun was placed to his head. Toxicology reports showed that there were traces of alcohol, weed, and Adderall in Chris's system. He wasn't prescribed Adderall, so he must have been taking it recreationally. And I am not judging for those who want to say I am. I am absolutely not judging Chris for doing that, because God knows my college days, I had a good time. While the autopsy was being performed on Chris, the police were searching Shannon's forerunner for clues to where she might be and to find out more about what could have happened to Chris. Inside her car, they found an empty anti-anxiety prescription bottle, and the only thing in it was 1 Adderall pill. And again, I'm not judging, I don't care. I'm only telling you guys this because it's part of the facts. They also found an empty oxycodone prescription bottle left behind by one of her friends. Her friends had been prescribed it for, I think, a back injury. I don't know what it was doing in her car, but there was no blood in the vehicle or any telltale clues of what happened. Bags of clothing that Shannon was going to donate to charity, they were missing from the vehicle, along with Shannon's overnight bag that she had packed. The front seats of her car were pushed all the way back, and the back seat floorboard was caked with mud. There was a crumpled pack of Newport cigarettes in the back of the Forerunner, and neither Shannon nor Chris smoked Newports, so they clearly didn't belong to them. Officers checked the car for fingerprints, but believed that it had been wiped down. But the next day, an officer was thinking about this, and he decided to check an envelope that had one of Shannon's bank statements in it that was left in the car, just randomly to see if there was a fingerprint. When he did, he found there was a match for the fingerprint, and it wasn't Shannon's. It belonged to a convicted felon named Lamarcus Davison. Lamarcus Davison, who goes by the name Slim, so we're going to call him Slim, was a 25-year-old convicted felon with no job, no car. He sold drugs for a living, and he just finished a 5-year stint for carjacking and aggravated robbery. The police were able to locate an address for him. It was 2316 Chipman Street. a house located only a few blocks from the railroad tracks where Chris was found.
Coincidence?
I think not.
I think not.
So now we're on to Tuesday, January 9th. There were so many errors with a search warrant. These errors that I'm not going to get into cost the police hours, but eventually they got a warrant and they entered the Chipman Street house. This house was described as a very small house. There's not much privacy in this house, and any activities that would have occurred were readily observable to anybody that was in the house. So whatever happening in the house, if you're there, you know what's going on.
It must be a really small house.
It's small. It's an older house, and it's in kind of a bit of an industrial area. The house itself is located right next to a waste management company called Waste Connections. There's a few other houses on that street, but it's not highly dense residential area, and it's kind of a rundown house. At 1:30 on Tuesday afternoon, they entered the house. When they got there, there was no one at the house. The police entered the kitchen area, and they saw an oddly shaped 32-gallon plastic garbage can. It was too big to be sitting in a kitchen. It's one of those big ones you keep outside. They were afraid someone was hiding in the garbage can, so they drew their weapons and they lifted the lid. When they removed the lid, they saw some more trash bags, but they also found something they weren't expecting. They could see an arm.
Oh, man.
When they lifted the items out, they found the discarded remains of Shannon's body. She was hogtied, and her lifeless eyes were still open.
Oh, awful.
Before I get into the details of Shannon and what happened to her, we're going to take a quick break to talk about us. Shameless plug. Hey everyone, if you go to our website, tntcrimes.com, you can find full unreleased episodes available for individual purchase. You can also join our membership where you get unlimited access to all of our unreleased episodes and early releases, mini episodes, and so many other awesome things. So go to tntcrimes.com, and thanks again for all your support. Shannon's body was kept there for another 2 hours, and they actually videotaped the whole crime scene. And I'm going to have a link to that on our website for those that want to be able to actually see the Chipman Street house. At about 3:30 on Tuesday afternoon, Shannon's body was removed and taken for an autopsy. The autopsy results are just as disturbing and just as heartbreaking as Chris's. So everybody be prepared. The gruesome scale is exceptionally high. Shannon had been repeatedly and violently raped, both vaginally, orally, and anally. The medical examiner said, quote, "It's much more than simple sexual trauma. It's extreme," end quote. She had been repeatedly kicked and punched in the genital region, and that assault was estimated to have lasted at least a few minutes.
Oh my God.
So it wasn't just a little kick or a little punch. Her genital region had bruising, but not just bruising, like blood clots. Semen was found in her mouth, in her anal cavity, and her vagina. Even more traumatizing, the perpetrators scrubbed her mouth and genitals very abrasively, and they used bleach.
Oh my God.
In an attempt to destroy evidence. She was also forced to drink the bleach, too. Despite this, the investigators were able to obtain DNA samples from her, which I'll get to in a little bit. She had bruises all over her. She had carpet burns on her back, on her buttocks. She had scratches all over her lower back and her upper buttocks. Her gums were ripped.
Oh.
They believe that occurred when she was forced to perform oral sex and also during the cleansing of her mouth, for lack of a better term. When Shannon was found, she was in a tight fetal position. She'd been bound with her head, neck, and shoulders twisted and pressed against her bent knees. Her left cheek was pressed really tightly against one of her knees. A portion of a sheer curtain had been used to tie up her ankles, and it also went around to her neck. And again, there was this floral fabric, like the one found by Chris, that had been used to tie her thighs together, bringing them really tight to her chest. A white plastic bag was placed over her head, and it covered her mouth and nose, and then it was knotted in the back to keep it in place.
Her knees were tied against her. She was tied in a fetal position.
Yeah, she was tied in tightly, really tightly. Her body was then put, while still alive, in 5 plastic garbage bags and stuffed in that large garbage. When she was found, she was naked from the waist down and was dressed only in a camisole and a sweater. And I think I forgot to mention that the medical examiner determined that she was not only raped by men, multiple men, but by a large object, too.
Oh, my God.
Because she couldn't breathe with the plastic bag tied tightly over her face, and due to the way she was positioned, being so tightly tied and put in a confined space, her actual cause of death was positional asphyxiation. The time of her death was estimated to be between Sunday afternoon and Monday afternoon. Even if the police hadn't made the blunders with the warrant, they wouldn't have gotten to her on time. Based on the plastic bag that covered her face and her positioning inside the garbage can, the oxygen around her face would have been depleted within 10 to 30 minutes after she was placed in the garbage can.
That's a long time.
That is a long time.
To be in a garbage can, in a garbage bag.
In pain.
In pain. Oh, that's awful.
And I thought it was interesting that she died with her eyes open. I don't know much about that. I'm going to have to learn about that. Mm-hmm. What makes some people die with their eyes open and some people die with their eyes closed. Anyway, this is just really heartbreaking to me. I learned about this case a long time ago, and years ago, and it always just stuck out in me because it is so tragic, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I was willing to go through all these details. At the crime scene, police found clothing of Shannon's. They found the photos she kept in her car. It was actually in the house. Her gray purse that she carried with her on Saturday night was found in the house. Her pink high heels that she was wearing that night were there. She also had an iPod with the inscription, quote, "Channon Christian, Mom and Dad, we love you," end quote, was found in that house. 2 of Chris's baseball caps were there. There was Chris's driver's license, and a whole bunch of other personal items were still in that house.
Now, you're going to use bleach on Shannon, but you're going to keep all her things in your house?
I don't think there's a solid plan going on with these people, and I will get to that. I'll get to that.
But, seriously?
We're not dealing with the most sophisticated criminals out there in this case, okay? I'm just going to lay that out. The house didn't have a lot of furniture. It was pretty much a TV, some chairs, and there was some broken furniture there, and a bunch of clothes just laying around. After thoroughly looking at the house and the crime scene, police surmised that both Chris and Shannon were most likely raped with a broken chair leg that they found there.
What? Oh, my God.
A chair leg.
Oh, my God.
A witness came forward. His name was Xavier Jenkins. He worked for Waste Connections, that waste management company I told you was right next to the Chipman Street house. He came forward to the police and gave them some important information. On the night Chris and Shannon went missing, at around 12:30 a.m., he got to work and he waited in the parking lot for a coworker to arrive, because their parking lot was one where it had a outside parking lot and then it had a gate that had to be opened. So he was waiting for his coworker to come and open the gate. From where he was parked, he could see the Chipman Street house, and he saw Shannon's vehicle parked in front of it on the street. He noticed the porch lights were on, and the house seemed, quote, pretty busy for that time of night. He'd also never seen Shannon's car there, and he worked 5 days a week and had the same routine, so it was unusual for him to see it there. He must have been waiting quite a while for his coworker, because at around 12:50 a.m., so this is 20 minutes later, he saw Shannon's vehicle leave the house, and it actually passed by him. The car slowed down as it went by the parking lot, and he could see 4 African-American men in it. The driver was wearing a hoodie and looked at him, quote, kind of strange, kind of mean-mugged. Another witness then came forward. His name was Jerome Arnold. Jerome was watching TV Sunday at around 1:45 a.m. at his house, a block away from the Chipman Street house. At that time, he heard 3 fairly even-spaced pops coming from the direction of the train tracks. I'm assuming this is the time when Chris was shot. Then another witness came forward. His name was Roy Thurman. He told police that Sunday at 7:45 a.m. while he was arriving to work, and he was a sandblaster at a company on Chipman Street, because like I said, it had some industrial stuff there too. He said at that time he saw smoke rising from the direction of the train tracks. He didn't report it, and I can't blame him. You'd think maybe somebody's just burning garbage. So the question is, what happened to Shannon and Chris from 9 p.m. until Shannon's body was found? In order to find that out, the police needed to find the killers. And they did. It didn't take them long. They tracked the cell phone records for Slim and saw that he'd been calling a guy named Eric Boyd. Officers spoke with Eric. They found him driving and they pulled him over. They asked him if he had any information on Slim, and he said he didn't. But then he eventually confessed that he did know where Slim was. He'd been helping him hide out in a vacant house. Police went to the house and they found Slim there with a bunch of potato chips and chip bags and candy bars, hiding like a coward. He was arrested, and his dumbass talked to investigators for 2.5 hours.
Couldn't shut up, I bet. What the heck is with these people?
I don't know. They need to know. Call an attorney. Of course, I hate him, so he can do whatever he wants. This is perfect. He is such a horrible person that he tried to blame it on other people.
Of course.
Including his half-brother, Latelvis Cobbins, who we call Rome. That's his nickname. Slim told authorities that Rome came to the Chipman Street house to visit him for the weekend. With him, he brought his girlfriend, Vanessa Coleman, and a friend named George Thomas, who goes by either E or Detroit. Those 3 lived in Kentucky, and they got a ride over to Tennessee a day before the murders. The police ended up interviewing all of these people, and each one basically pointed the finger at the other people and totally minimized their involvement. They also told authorities that Eric Boyd was involved. I went through a voluminous amount of court records because there were 5 trials and retrials, and I'm going to get to all this. I read through so much evidence, and it's really hard to figure out exactly what happened because everybody is saying this person did it or that person did it. But I'm going to piece together for our listeners, to the best of my knowledge and ability, what I think happened to Shannon and Chris. And then I'm going to go through a little bit about the trials because it's pretty interesting. And I have clips from the trials so you guys can actually hear these people. Their trials were a circus. So do you want to know what happened?
Unfortunately, I do.
Chris went to Kara's apartment to meet Shannon in his truck sometime between 8 and 9, probably closer to 9. He came inside and he smoked weed. We know this because there was a pipe at Kara's house that wasn't hers, that wasn't there before she left for the party, but was there when she got back. In addition, one of Chris's friends admitted that he threw some weed out of Chris's truck so it wouldn't look bad to authorities.
Everyone needs a friend like that.
Right? That's true. And I mean, this was the early 2000s, so weed wasn't legal back then. After Chris was in the apartment for a while with Shannon, they left and went outside. Shannon got into the driver's side of her 4Runner, and Chris was standing outside the window, and he leaned in to give her a kiss. At that moment, Slim, Rome, and Eric Boyd drove up in a car that Eric had borrowed from a cousin's for the weekend. The three men had left the Chipman Street house to go do a carjacking. Because Slim was falling on hard times, he was going to get evicted. He didn't have a job, he didn't have any money, and he was good at carjacking because he'd done it before. Of course, he got caught, so I'm not sure if he was that good.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he was that good at it.
What initially started out as a random carjacking turned into so much more than that. Probably because Slim was really upset his girlfriend left him that day. Her name was Daphne. He'd beat her a couple times too many, so she walked out on him. Daphne was this very beautiful girl, and Shannon was extremely gorgeous. So some people think that Slim was originally the leader of the carjacking and saw how beautiful Shannon was.
And was angry at pretty girls.
Exactly. In any event, the men pulled up near Shannon's 4Runner, and while Chris was giving a kiss to Shannon, they brandished a .22 caliber pistol. Exactly what they did next isn't clear, but we know that Shannon and Chris were blindfolded in the vehicle, and their wrists were bound in front of them. Slim drove, and Rome drove Eric Boyd's car back to the Chipman Street house. The Chipman Street house was about 4 miles from the apartment complex. When they got there, they brought the young couple into the house. Vanessa, Rome's girlfriend, was playing video games. With who? I don't know. She was playing with somebody, but again, everybody says I wasn't in the car, I was in the car. So she was either playing with Rome or with E. That's to the best of my knowledge. As far as what exactly happened to Chris, we know that pornographic photos of male anal sex were found on Eric Boyd's cell phone. Given that he was most likely raped with a broken chair leg, I think it's safe to assume he was raped in that house. Whether Shannon was forced to watch it or not isn't known. He was beaten, he was sodomized, Chris was tortured for at least 2.5 hours. He was then gagged and led with a dog leash around his neck, naked from the waist down, to the 4Runner outside, where he was driven to those railroad tracks. It's believed all 4 men drove there with Chris in the car to the railroad tracks, which would leave Shannon behind, only being watched by Vanessa. This implicates her in the crime, and you'll see this is a big problem for Vanessa. They made Chris, while blindfolded, walk down the tracks again with a leash around him, and then force him to bend over. Whether they raped him again there or not isn't known, but the medical examiner did state that he was raped within an hour of his death. Because of the fire, the extreme amount of heat burned the DNA so it wasn't testable, but they do know there was semen in him.
I was wondering about that.
That's how they can't figure out exactly who.
Yeah, I was like, did they find DNA? Did they match it? But that makes sense.
He was most likely raped by Slim and Eric Boyd.
Sickos.
We know that Shannon was taken to the back bedroom where Slim's room was. And there were only 2 bedrooms, I believe, in this house. Shannon was tied up on an air mattress in his bedroom. Vanessa heard her say, quote, "Stop, quit, don't do it." And she said that the men took turns spending about 10 or 15 minutes each in Slim's room with Shannon most of Saturday night. Now, according to Rome, and he actually testifies about this in his trial, he told Shannon that he would make sure she lived if she performed oral sex on him. If she did that, that would be a way to motivate him to make sure she lived. So he says that it was consensual, that she wanted to give him a blowjob.
Sure.
The medical examiner could determine that Shannon was sitting up and had spit semen out of her mouth. It had gone onto her jeans that she was wearing at the time and her shirt, which would have been from Rome. So my best guess is about 12:30, these guys realized they need to get rid of Chris and they need to start figuring out some sort of plan, because it's only 20 minutes later that Chris is taken out of the house. At 12:30, Shannon is forced to call her parents.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And tell them that she'd be late. her dad, he says that she just seems so much like herself. I'm paraphrasing, but he can't imagine that she would really have been held captive. But to the best of everybody's evidence, she definitely was, and she just must have been able to play it off really well. At least twice during the night, Shannon had to go to the bathroom, and Slim would bring her in there and watch her when she went to the bathroom. Again, she was raped throughout the whole night. Then, on Sunday morning, Vanessa cooked breakfast for Slim, Rome, and E, and while they ate, Shannon stayed in Slim's bedroom, tied up. After that, Vanessa went into the room and she gave Shannon some water. When she entered the room, she saw Shannon was still bound and blindfolded. I don't know why she gave her water. I don't know the details, but she did. Maybe she's trying to be nice. I don't know. Then Slim's ex-girlfriend stopped by the house. This was around noon. Daphne, I told you about Daphne. She wanted to get some things, and she was used to being able to walk around in that house. She lived in it. She actually testified in court, and I'm going to play a clip from that. She was confused when she was at that house because she was able to go in the back bedroom, but she couldn't use the bathroom when she asked. They told her no. She assumed Vanessa was in the bathroom and the door was locked. And here's a bit of her testimony about that.
When you pull up to the house, what do you see?
I saw LaMarcus standing in like the sunroom, and the front door was open, and then we kept a blanket over the door going into the living room, and it was pulled back.
You see anybody else?
I saw LaTalvis sitting in a chair beside the kitchen door, and he really didn't speak to me. He just had his head down, twiddling his thumbs or something. He didn't speak, and he always spoke to me.
So you go into the north bedroom?
Yes.
And why are you going in the north bedroom?
To go into the bathroom to try to get my belongings.
Okay. Where's Mr. Davison at when you try to go into the bedroom?
He started following me through there, and I got to the bathroom door, and it was locked. And I asked him if Vanessa was in there.
Okay. You can't tell us what he said,
Yeah.
Okay? But you tried to get into the bathroom right here?
Yeah, I assumed Vanessa was in there. I could hear water running, and it sounded like something fell into the sink or something. But I didn't hear anybody speak.
Okay. And were you able to get into the bathroom?
No.
What did you do then?
I tried to go around through the kitchen, through the other bedroom to go into the bathroom.
Okay.
And he grabbed me, wouldn't let me go back there.
Everyone in the house then left for an hour in Shannon's car. They went to the store. When they did, they left Shannon alone, tied up. After they returned, Slim decided it was time to get rid of Shannon. He put his arm around her neck and he began choking her in front of everyone. He dragged her to the kitchen. After choking her for a little bit, she still didn't die. So he forced her to drink the bleach, and that's when they scrubbed her genitals and mouth with bleach. Then he tried to break her neck by repeatedly snapping it, but that didn't work either. At some point, by the grace of God, Shannon became unconscious, and Slim forced Vanessa to check her for a pulse. Now, Vanessa claims she couldn't find one, but the medical examiner said that had to be a lie because she was alive. Shannon was then tied up and stuffed in the garbage can and left to die. Rome told his friends that his brother, quote, threw a white bitch in the trash. Trials were held for Slim, Rome, E, and Vanessa. The judge and this is pretty interesting, Judge Baumgartner was the presiding judge for all of those cases. He was an alcoholic with a drug problem. From years of abusive drinking, the judge had given himself pancreatitis. Pancreatitis is an extremely painful condition, so he was prescribed painkillers. And this is very relevant to the trials because it affects their outcome.
Oh, I can't fucking wait to hear this.
He started doctor shopping in May of 2006, and the trials didn't take place until 2008. Between 2006 and early 2010, when the doctors finally cut him off, he'd obtained prescriptions for approximately 2,500 pain pills. Hydrocodone and oxycodone were his favorites, and he'd gotten them from over a dozen doctors.
What?
That's a lot of pain pills.
That is a lot of pain pills. Holy shit.
However, those 12 doctors weren't enough for his habit, so he turned to some drug dealers to supply him with thousands more. That $2,500 was just the amount prescribed to him.
He was high as a kite all the time.
Yes. The first drug dealer he went to, her name was Dina Castleman. She was a call girl and a drug addict who had graduated from his drug court in 2006.
What? He had all the contacts, right? He's contacting people that graduated his drug court to provide him with drugs.
Yeah, a call girl.
Wow.
She became his lover.
What? Scandalous.
The other drug dealer, his name was Chris Gibson, and in April of 2007, he had pled guilty before the judge to aggravated assault, and he was sentenced to 4 years probation. The judge used his leverage over Chris to get him to give him drugs. So during the trial...
And this was tried at the same time? No. Okay.
So there were 4 separate trials, but they were all tried by the same judge, Judge Baumgartner. And the trials were one right after the other, pretty much, except for Eric Boyd's, and I'll get to his. After the fact, it was discovered the judge was prescribed 90 painkillers during the first 2 weeks of the first trial for the murder of Chris and Shannon.
90 pills
That's
in
what he
14
was
days. Jesus.
The judge was basically strung out from dawn to dusk during all 4 of the worst crimes in Knoxville's history. He eventually resigned and was disbarred.
Man, I wonder where Judge Baumgartner is today.
I think he died. Don't quote me on that, but I think he died.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, wasn't living the healthiest lifestyle.
Wow.
And he had pancreatitis.
Yeah.
During the separate trials, autopsy photos were shown, and a new assistant prosecutor was there when one of the autopsy photos was displayed on the screen, the large screen in the courtroom. She actually fainted.
She did?
Yeah, I saw the video.
Oh my God.
And they had to stop court. It was
so
the photos
graphic?
were so graphic. Yeah, they were awful. On April 16th of 2008, Eric Boyd, he's the one that had the pornographic photos on his phone, he was found guilty in federal court of being an accessory to a fatal carjacking and for failing to report the location of a known fugitive. He was not even tried for murder, but that changes later. Rome testified at his own trial, and I told you about that. Here's a few moments of what this asshole had to say, and if you want to hear the rest of it, you can go to our website.
When I went into the room, she's laying on the air mattress with her hands bound over her head. She's laying on her back. Her hands are tied, still tied like this, and tied to a duffel bag full of free weights and books and stuff. Same thing with her feet. Her ankles are tied, and it's tied to a duffel bag. It's tied to a duffel bag with weights and books in it. So I untied her hands. Well, I didn't untie her hands. I untied the string that was going to the duffel bag. I untied it so she could sit up and drink the water. I gave her the water. She drank the water like that. She asked me what's going on. I said, I don't know. She asked me where her boyfriend is. I said, I don't know. She asked me, could you smoke a cigarette? I said, I don't see why not. I took a cigarette out, lit it for her, and gave it to her. She asked me, why were we doing this? I told her, it's not me. It's not me. I don't have anything to do with this. Matter of fact, we're being held here against our will just like you are. The only difference is that you're tied up and we're not. She started asking me, would I convince him to let her go? I said, I'll try. She said, just please, just please. She said, please, can you just convince him to let me go? I said, I'll try. And she said, I'll do anything, just please, just let me go. She even offered oral sex. So I had her give me oral sex. She gave me oral sex. As I started to ejaculate, I heard a noise outside, and I heard Vanessa's flushing the toilet. So I got spooked. I jumped up, fixed my clothes. As I ejaculated, it got on her shirt and some on her pants. I fixed myself. I fixed my clothes. I put her back like I found her and went back into the living room and sat down. Vanessa came out of the bathroom. We sat there on the floor. Just sat there looking stupid. I didn't tell the truth. I told bits and pieces of the truth, but I just left out what I did because I was scared. I knew that this was a real bad, horrible situation, and I knew what they did to them people was terrible, and I didn't want to be a part. I didn't want to have nothing to do with it, so I tried to distance myself from it as much as I could. So when the police asked me, did I have anything to do with it? Did I have sex with that girl? I told them no. I lied again. I was scared, man. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. All I knew that I was caught up in some real bad mess, man. So they got through questioning me. I cried and all of that. I sit here today in front of y'all and admit I lied repeatedly. That's why I'm sitting here telling you now what happened, how it happened, that I did not have any knowledge about what was going on before it happened. And I'm sorry. To the families, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
But so you know, before he went to testify, his attorneys were so upset that they went before the judge and they asked to withdraw. And the judge refused to let them. They said that he was going against their advice, which he should have listened to them because the jury ended up sentencing him to life without parole. Nobody bought his story that he was kind of an innocent bystander and Shannon wanted to perform oral sex on him. On October 28th of 2009, Slim was found guilty and sentenced to death.
With regard to the count charging Mr. Davidson with the first-degree felony murder of Hugh Christopher Newsom, that is counts 1, 2, 5, 6, 10, 13, and 14, what is the decision of the jury as to what the punishment should be with regard to those counts?
The punishment is death.
On December 8th of 2009, George Thomas, was sentenced to life without parole. Now, Vanessa Coleman, the girlfriend of Rome, she was granted immunity by federal authorities for testifying at Eric Boyd's trial for carjacking. And because at the time she didn't have an attorney, she didn't realize that the immunity granted to her in federal court didn't cross over to state court immunity.
Well, she's a dipshit.
Yeah, that's a big problem for her because she ended up already telling everybody what happened. So when she went to court, she wasn't granted the immunity. Vanessa claimed that she was basically a hostage at the house and that she had told the guys she was going to call the police. And when she did, they threatened her life. She claimed at trial that she tried to escape, but Rome grabbed her by the throat. However, while she was in jail, she wrote a letter to her parents, and the investigators got the letter. I'm going to play a clip from the trial where a police officer reads the letter from her to her parents. Here it is.
Starts off with Saturday night. I gave her water from a cup out of the kitchen. When she was blindfolded, I gave it to her. She reached up to grab it, and I placed the cup in her hand, but I did not touch her. I never touched the clothes she had on. I never binded her arms. I touched that part of her, and there's an arrow drawn to what appears to be a hand showing my 2 fingers touching her wrist. When Davison said, "Vanessa, get in here and check her fucking pulse right fucking now," and she makes a notation, I only did that once. I slept on those sheets a few times, the one that they binded her arms with. But after they were on her, I did not touch them. The next page shows a picture of a stick person, appeared to be laying down, said her hands are binded together behind her head, and that's it connected to the book bag, and her legs were tied together also. and she was blindfolded with a towel wrapped around her head, except her nose and her mouth was uncovered. I used the bathroom once after she did and before she did. Davidson would take her when she had to go, and he would stand in there and watch her to make sure she wouldn't leave.
In addition to the letter, investigators found that she had created a journal, and an entry in her journal right after the murders said, quote, "I've had one hell of an adventure since I've been in the big Tennessee. It's a crazy world these days, but I love the fun adventures and lessons that I've learned. It's going to be an interesting year," end quote. She says that was taken out of context. However, I mean, when she went to the big Tennessee...
She's supposedly being held hostage.
I know, that was the issue they had.
And didn't she get left alone?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't believe her. She's full of shit.
And some people theorize that she says when she took a pulse, there wasn't one because that would make it look as if Shannon was already dead before all the other things were placed, garbage bags and stuff. So it would help alleviate some of the culpability of her. She was already dead. I don't know why you are tying her up more and putting more bags around her and all this around her head.
Right.
Vanessa was acquitted of Chris's death. She was found guilty of only facilitating the death of Shannon, not actually committing it. However, she was still sentenced to 53 years in prison.
Whoa.
Her sentencing judge was Judge Baumgartner.
Judge Baumgartner does not fuck around with those sentences.
And as I told you, he was forced to resign in March of 2011. Because of Judge Baumgartner's horrible judgment in his own life, his actions were held to have impaired his ability to conduct trials. I mean, during the trials, he was falling asleep and dozing off and spacing out. It was very obvious to many people something wasn't right with him. On December 1st, 2011, Judge Baumgartner, as you know, was disbarred in 2011. And about 7 weeks after that, a judge named Judge John Carey Blackwood granted new trials to all 4 of the defendants on the state charges.
I mean, that's kind of, I can't argue with that if the judge is high through the whole thing.
But Chris and Shannon's poor parents.
I know,
There's
I feel so
another
bad.
trial now.
And they're just going to be found guilty again, right? I mean, right, Talia?
Yeah, why are you spoiling
I
this?
know, what is this? Why is this such a waste of everybody's time?
Judge Black's orders for a new trial, they were appealed, and they were actually denied for Rome and Slim. So they weren't granted new trials. But E and Vanessa both were granted new trials. At the second trial for Vanessa, she was found guilty, and Judge Blackwood gave her a 35-year prison sentence. This was 2013, and she was given credit for time already served. She was actually eligible for parole, but it got denied. There's a Facebook page out there and a petition you can sign to support her not being paroled. And the reasoning that they give is that she had to have known what was going on in the house. At some point, she was the only one watching over Shannon. She minimizes her involvement, but she admitted that she was jealous of the attention that Rome had given Shannon.
Ugh, that's just gross.
Anyway, she's still in prison. At the retrial of E, he was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he remains to this day. Remember I told you Eric Boyd was only charged federally for carjacking?
Yes.
Finally, in 2018, 11 years after the conclusion of his original trial, a Knox County grand jury returned a 36-count indictment charging him with murder, rape, kidnapping. In 2019, only a year ago, on August 13th, a jury found him guilty on almost all the charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. I want to thank Mike Pelletier for writing Endless Nightmare, because that was really helpful. I know it was a hard one, but I want to thank everybody for listening. And if you haven't subscribed already, please hit the little subscribe/follow button. You can also get additional information on our website, tntcrimes.com. You can go to Instagram, it's TNT Crimes Podcast. You can go to Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like to become a member, which we would love to have you become a member, you can go to patreon.com/TNT Crimes. Please do check out some of the episodes we have. They're also available on our website online for a tiny little fee. Anything else, Tanya?
No, I think that's everything.
You sure?
Yep. So until next week.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.